Imagine wanting peace more than anything, but always finding yourself in the middle of a storm. You crave stillness, you say you want quiet, you dream of stability, and yet, you keep returning to the same chaos. The same arguments. The same toxic dynamics. The same overwhelming cycles that leave you breathless, scattered, and wondering, why do I keep ending up here? Carl Jung had an answer, and it begins with a haunting idea. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That thing you call bad luck, that pattern you keep repeating, that person you always attract or become, it's not fate. It's your shadow. The part of you disowned. The side you've repressed. The instincts, desires, fears, and wounds that live in the basement of your psyche, always active, always watching, always waiting. And the more you deny it, the louder it becomes. You say you want peace, but Jung would ask, which part of you wants peace and which part is still? Addicted to the noise, because chaos isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's familiar, and what's familiar often feels safe. If you grew up in emotional volatility, peace might feel unnatural. If your nervous system was trained to expect crisis, stillness might feel like danger. So even as you consciously seek calm, your unconscious is scanning for conflict. You don't mean to, you don't plan it, but you find it again and again. This is the shadow at work. Jung believed that your shadow is made up of everything you reject in yourself. A rejection doesn't mean deletion. The shadow doesn't disappear, it just moves underground. And from there, it rules your life. You might feel like you're making free choices, but in truth, many of your choices are reactions. Reenactments. Attempts to resolve old wounds by recreating them. This is why chaos becomes so seductive. It feels like a test you can finally pass. If you can just fix this person, if you can just survive the situation, then maybe you'll prove you're lovable. Maybe you'll undo the pain. Maybe you'll find peace, but you never do, because peace isn't found by replaying the past. Is found by confronting it. Jung didn't say get rid of your shadow. He said integrate it. Look at it. Name it. Feel it. Understand that the parts of you that seek chaos aren't evil. They're wounded. They're hungry for attention. They're trying to tell you something you haven't been willing to hear. And here's the truth. You cannot heal what you're still pretending doesn't exist. So the first step is this. Stop pretending. Stop saying you don't know why your relationships keep exploding. Stop acting surprised when you sabotage your own peace. Stop blaming fate or others or timing. Start looking inward. Ask, what part of me benefits from the drama? What fear does stillness bring up in me? What would I have to feel if I finally let the chaos go? Because often, what we fear most is not the storm, but the silence that follows. No one is born addicted to chaos. But very early in life, you learn something dangerous, that chaos sometimes equals connection. If love in your childhood came with unpredictability, if comfort was mixed with control, if care was given but always felt like it might be taken away, then your nervous system learned a brutal truth. Chaos is home, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. And the familiar, no matter how painful, becomes the blueprint. Carl Jung believed that our earliest emotional experience shaped the architecture of our unconscious mind. He called it the complex, an emotionally charged cluster of memories, beliefs, and patterns that form around significant life experiences. And once that complex is formed, it doesn't stay in the past. It becomes a lens through which you interpret the present, even when the present no longer matches the past. So when peace comes into your life, when someone is gentle, available, consistent, part of you doesn't know what to do. You question it, you test it, you sabotage it, not because you want to, but because your internal alarm system doesn't recognize peace as safe. It feels too foreign. Jung said the psyche is self-regulating, always trying to restore balance, but balance doesn't mean comfort. Balance means what feels right to your internal map. And if your map says chaos equals connection, then peace feels like abandonment. This is how the cycle continues. You crave safety, but chase danger. You want calm, but provoke storms. You seek love, but run from intimacy. And then you blame yourself. You say you're too much. You say you're hard to love. You say something must be wrong with me, but nothing is wrong with you. You are acting out a script you didn't write, a script written by experience, not essence. And here's the turning point Jung offered. What was created by experience can be changed through awareness. The unconscious does not want to stay hidden. It wants to be integrated. It wants you to see. Not to shame you, not to scare you, but to set you free. Because once you see the pattern, truly see it, you are no longer inside a dot, you are above it, and from that height, you can choose again. But first, you must grieve. You must grieve the years you spent mistaking chaos for passion, mistaking tension for love, mistaking instability for intensity. You must grieve the peace you pushed away because you didn't yet know how to let it in. And then you begin to rebuild, slowly, gently, with compassion for the part of you that was just trying to survive. Because survival taught you chaos, but healing can teach you calm. Integration is not a dramatic event, it's not a breakthrough that fixes everything overnight, it's a quiet, daily decision to turn inward and listen to the parts of you you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Carl Jung believed that the shadow doesn't need to be destroyed, it needs to be seen. And when you begin to see it, truly see it, something shifts. Instead of being hijacked by emotion, you notice the pattern. Instead of blaming the outside world, you turn inward with curiosity. You ask, why did that moment trigger me? What story am I repeating? Who in me is speaking right now? Because often, the part of you that reacts isn't your adult self, it's a much younger part. A piece of you still frozen in the past, still trying to survive something long gone. Shadow integration means building a relationship with that part, not silencing it, not judging it, but listening. Imagine this. A child is screaming in the dark. You don't quiet them by yelling back. You quiet them by turning on the light, by showing them they're not alone anymore. That's what you must do with your shadow. The part of you that sabotages peace isn't evil, is scared, it's learned that chaos is safer than vulnerability. That drama is more reliable than stillness. That pain is more familiar than trust, and now, for the first time, you have the power to teach us something new. That's where integration begins. You let the fear speak. You let the anger breathe. You let the grief rise to the surface, not to drown you, but to free you. Because here's the paradox. What we resist persists, but what we turn toward with compassion begins to transform. This is not easy. It requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires feeling things you've worked hard to suppress. But it also gives you something profound, inner coherence. Instead of being split, a war between who you want to be and who you secretly are, you begin to unify. You begin to walk through life not as a fractured self, but as a whole one. And this changes everything. Because when you are no longer at war with yourself, you stop attracting people who recreate that war for you. When you are no longer chasing chaos inside, you stop tolerating it outside. You begin to crave peace not as a fantasy, but as a natural extension of your self-respect. You begin to choose different partners. You speak your needs without guilt. You exit conversations that echo old pain. You create boundaries that don't require explanation. Because now, peace feels like home, not abandonment. This is shadow work, not in theory, but in practice. Not in isolation, but in relationship. It shows up in how you talk to yourself, in how you pause before reacting. In how you soothe your inner child instead of shaming it. In how you hold space for contradiction, for being messy and magnificent all at once. Because that's what real integration is, not perfection, but wholeness. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you cannot become until you welcome all that you are, even the parts you once ran from. So what does life feel like after the chaos? That's the question no one asks. Because we assume peace will just arrive, like a reward or a prize for healing. But peace is not a reward. It's a practice, and for many people, it's unfamiliar terrain. Carl Jung believed that once you begin integrating the shadow, your energy is no longer used to suppress or fight against yourself. And what happens then is subtle but profound. You begin to feel space inside your own mind, moments of quiet, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer running from the imperfections. You no longer need every relationship to prove your worth. You no longer panic when things go still. You stop creating chaos to feel alive, because now you feel alive in the quiet too. This is where real peace begins, not in the world around you, but in your nervous system. It's not a lack of stimulation. It's the presence of safety. You can breathe without bracing. You can feel without fear. You can rest, not because everything is done, but because you trust yourself enough to stop for a while. And yet, this stage brings its own challenges, because when you built your identity around survival, when your story has always involved drama, conflict, or proving, that peace can feel disorienting. Who are you Without the chaos, who are you if you no longer need to fight? That's the quiet void that peace opens, and it's not emptiness, it's potential. The potential to choose, consciously, what kind of life you want to build from here. A life not ruled by fear, but led by meaning. A life not defined by fixing, but by creating. A life where discomfort doesn't scare you because you've met your darkness and made peace with it. Jung believed that the goal of life is not perfection, but individuation, the process of becoming whole. And becoming whole means living with all parts of yourself, not just the polished ones. It means having compassion for your chaos, without letting it steer the wheel. It means knowing that peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of awareness. You'll still get triggered. You'll still fall back into old habits sometimes. But the difference is, you'll know what's happening. You'll respond instead of react. You'll pause instead of explode. You'll choose instead of repeat. And that choice is what makes you free. Because the unconscious doesn't have to stay unconscious. Your shadow doesn't have to stay in the dark. And you don't have to stay at war with yourself. So what does life feel like after the chaos? It feels like breathing fully for the first time. It feels like being able to sit in a room alone and not drown in the silence. It feels like telling the truth to yourself, to others, and not flinching. It feels like knowing that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build. This is the quiet revolution, not changing the world outside, but changing how you meet it inside. And now you're ready, not because the chaos is gone, but because you've changed your relationship to it. And that changes everything.